Oh my god, a chatter. Hello. Holy shit, two chatters. Wait, no. It's playing my voice. Okay, we fixed it. Wow. Three and four? I'm losing my mind. Another one. They just keep coming. They just keep coming. What? There's so many. Okay. Lick the microphone? No. There's so many of you. Yeah. I was going to do a political panel on Roe v. Wade. And then they were like, we couldn't get Destiny. We couldn't get Not So Erudite. And so I'm just going to cancel it. Crushing. But I had already done my makeup. So I was like, I have to stream anyways. Wait, I also gotta change. Yeah, I have two Jewish grandparents. And my mother is Jewish. But my mother's half Jewish. Both my parents are half Jewish. But my mother is Jewish through the matrilineal line. So no, I'm not wearing any bra. So hopefully my nipples aren't just like poking through stuff. Yes, my mother's mother is Jewish. And then my father's father is also Jewish. So I have two half Jewish parents. Yeah, we're doing Jew math, okay? To figure out exactly how Jewish I am. Bro, I feel like, I don't know, I'll keep talking to chat for a little while. Because you guys are great, entertaining, fun, amazing people. Oh, I had an idea for a Twitch stream, which is just to like set up my Venmo in like the corner. And if people Venmo me money, I'll like write things just on my tits. That's the idea. That's the next big move. It's Flow Trace. Oh my god, Flow Trace. I was gonna stream with you. And then my hopes were crushed and I wasn't able to do it. I felt very bad about that. So I'm sorry. Yeah, I did. Oh, I abandoned Flow Trace and ignoring chat. Yeah, genius, groundbreaking, never been done before. Chat should be booba obsessed today. And every day. There's no other way to be. Until you get a post like on Twitter. Here's the thing, okay, because I want on OnlyFans, I want to post like a lot before I post on Twitter. Like I'd like the ratio to be like 5 posts on OnlyFans for like 1 post on Twitter or more, preferably. So I posted on OnlyFans yesterday. And then I was like I was pretty sparse in the past 2 weeks before that, which is why I've been slow on posting on Twitter. But because I did like posts recently, and there's like a backlog of posts that are not public, um, I will probably post on Twitter very soon. That's my reasoning though. So I always want OnlyFans to be like very high value for people, where like I want it to be you see a lot of content you don't see elsewhere. So yeah, which means functionally we'll probably post soon. Stream, I I don't have the nicest phone. Um, I'm I make sometimes 14K in a month, but usually not. I think I've done that once, and then I've gotten close other times. Hmm. I might message that Venezuelan streamer that I talked to previously and see if he wants to talk. Oh, I titled the stream Gay Ass Stream, but I meant like gay hyphen stream. Or, yeah, like gay ass as like one descriptor for the stream. It's not a gay ass stream, it's a gay ass stream. Mm, that does seem understandably confusing. Yeah, it's gay ass, not gay ass stream. It goes well, the multicultural streams. It goes very well. Oh, flow trace in chat, being a god, enabling terms. So yeah, was gonna do a Roe v. Wade stream, but alas. Oh, I also want to debate Mr. Girl. I'm gonna try to do like a call-in whenever he has his call-ins. So I want to just like get in there and argue with him. I think he doesn't want to argue with me. Very sad. And I don't want to make it like a big event. I just want to talk to him. The trans values test. That sounds like trans values test sounds like good content. I want to argue with Max about. Oh man, I want to move this into this screen. I want to argue with him about like makeup and plastic surgery because I think that Max's view of makeup and plastic surgery is very specific to like his experience or the external experience of someone who looks at someone who's wearing makeup or has had plastic surgery. And I don't think it's able to account for like the internal experience of the person wearing the makeup well enough. I think he understands like part of the dimensions of what that experience is like, and I think he misses other ones, and the ones that he misses are important to making the case that like makeup and plastic surgery can be good. Is he a pedophile? I don't think he's a pedophile. Oh man. Okay. This is so big. Okay. It's like small on my screen, but huge on the stream. Yeah, I think they're cooler than Seth Rogen. I think so. Seth Rogen's like, oh, thank you for breaking into my car. This is what it's like to live in American cities. And I love it. Okay, we're gonna take this quiz. Only people. Oh, wait, I should. Only people who wish to or have undergone medical transition should speak for the trans community. I don't think so, because the trans community includes people who do not wish to undergo medical transition or haven't. Yeah, autogynephilia is a real phenomenon. Definitely. I am an autogynephile. Being trans can be a choice. Yeah, because there's non dysphoric trans people. Pronouns in bio do nothing to help trans people and exist only to make cis people feel good about themselves. Yeah, probably. I think it's just dumb virtue signaling. Um, just this like, I'm progressive, holier than thou kind of attitude. Cis women are justified in being uncomfortable in bathrooms around masculine presenting trans women. I'm not sure. Maybe. It depends on if trans women are more likely to assault cis women, which I would guess is true, but I don't know. Just because I know that the statistics for trans people tend to be somewhere in between men and women's statistics for a lot of things. And so if that is the case with sexual assault and crime, then I would say yes. But I don't actually know that. I do actually consider myself an autogynephile. All trans women can be grouped into two categories, AGP and HSTS. I'm not sure if that's true. Um, I think that most trans women that I know, and I would consider myself an autogynephile, but I don't know about HSTS. I don't know if that's real. So I'll say no. Also, I think it's possible maybe to have like elements of both of these things. Like when I was first considering transition, I like made a list of like reasons to transition and ways that my life could end up if I did transition. And one of the reasons that I said for transitioning was that I could date men and be in like a straight relationship with them. And that was like one of my major things of like, I just want to be able to be with guys in this like heterosexual kind of relationship that I've always pictured for myself, but have never been able to actualize. And like early on as a kid, that was really confusing for me because like I always pictured myself in a straight relationship, but like as a girl. And so I didn't know if I should like consider myself gay because I was like, no, I don't want to date men unless I was a woman, and then I would want to date men. Very confusing. So I think you can have elements of both of these, but all in two, probably not. The goal of transitioning is passing as the opposite gender. No, people have all sorts of different goals. Yeah, lots of people just like boy mode and they don't try to present female in the world. So, yeah. Even if it is a dead meme, attack helicopter would theoretically be a valid gender identity. No, that's fucking stupid. Neopronouns are valid? No. If you don't experience dysphoria, you are not transgender. No, trans includes people who don't have dysphoria. It shouldn't, I should specify, it shouldn't include them because these are fundamentally different groups, but it does. Because the progressives have infiltrated the trans movement and used it as a culture war issue. Yeah, so true. Trans people are often unnecessarily harsh on themselves and their own appearance. Very true. Trans people must disclose they are trans before having sex with someone, regardless of past surgeries. Um, I mostly agree. Like, I just have the tendency to like lawyer these things. I think there are some scenarios where like it's obvious that you're trans and the person you're interacting with knows that you're trans and you don't need to explicitly say it. I think that like 99% of cases you should say it. So I'll say agree. Trans people can never feel free in a cis-normative society. No, I disagree. I think that like a cis-normative society will probably create the most like freedom for trans people because cis-normative implies like gender roles and some sort of order within the system. When you have like the breakdown of cis-normative societies, the breakdown of like gender roles and the connection of those gender roles to sex, I think you create like disorder. And I don't think that's good. I think that causes all sorts of bad stuff. Probably not. DIY HRT is generally safe and effective. I would guess not. I know that there have been like scams with DIY HRT and DIY HRT that turned out not to be so good. DIY HRT for trans masks should be legal, even if it enables steroid usage. Probably not. I mean, like, I think that in general, HRT for trans masculine people should be more restricted than HRT for trans feminine people. The goal of transitioning is to blend into society. Again, I don't necessarily think so. Some people have different goals. A lot of times it's just like dysphoria, and sometimes what's going to help with dysphoria might not help you blend in with society. Trans people need to be unapologetically themselves, regardless of society's opinion. I mean, it depends on what this like constitutes, right? Because if it's like being unapologetically yourself, yeah, no, because there's lots of ways that, like, if you're an autogynephile, you probably shouldn't be involving like children or the broader public in that. So I'll say no. I know what the word trip, oh boy, means. I do. I've been on 4chan. The medical risks of HRT are overblown. No, probably not. I think they're probably, if anything, they're somewhat underreported. A lot of people, especially in the trans community, will really encourage like going on HRT, even if they don't really understand like the implications medically for it. The 4chan trans subculture is toxic and actively makes trans people within it miserable. Yeah, I think that's true. I, like years ago, yeah. I've done this off and on. I can't remember if it's been like a full year streak or a full 2 year streak. But I blocked 4chan on my computer so that like I couldn't actually access it. And I just stopped like ever going on 4chan. And I've been much happier. So I agree. Non-binary dysphoria exists. I'm not non-binary, but it seems like some people who are non-binary, they have dysphoria. So yeah. At least they report to, and I don't have a way of like verifying that they're lying. The absence of urinals in women's toilets is transphobic. Yeah, obviously not. By I'm AGP, you mean the Blanchard definition, or do you actually get off to being a girl? Well, these are kind of the same thing. Like Blanchard would consider you AGP if you got off to being a girl. Um, but yeah, I would say like both of those fit me to different degrees. Gender dysphoria is a mental illness. Yeah, definitely. It's not good that it's growing. All right. DIY HRT is better than a prescription because it gives you more options and freedom. Um, it is true that it gives you more options and freedom, but it also has drawbacks. It also depends on what the prescription is and who's giving it to you. If it's like an endocrinologist who's really closely monitoring your hormone levels, a prescription is going to be a lot better. I think inherently a prescription is not necessarily better than DIY. So I'll say, but I'll say it tends to be. So I'll say disagree. Um, the trap slur. I don't think it's a slur, but I think that like, yeah, I don't think it's like a slur, and I don't think it's insulting. But I think it can be like, it's just like there are some words that aren't slurs, but you wouldn't want to imply to people unless you were like comfortable with that person. It's like if I were to call like my friend a bitch, I think that like you can do that in a friendly way and in a way that's not bothering them. But I wouldn't necessarily say that like you should just call anyone a bitch. And I don't think that bitch is a slur. So I think trap is like more in that kind of gray area where it can be like a dick thing to say to someone, but it's not a slur. Blanchard considers all lesbians AGP. Yeah. His idea is that there's like basically an erotic target location error. And I would say that like every trans woman that I've ever met who is attracted to women was AGP, or revealed that they were AGP with like enough time knowing them. So I think this makes sense. And I would say like most trans women that I knew who were attracted to men also eventually revealed that they were AGP. So I think most trans women are just AGP. Most, no, of course not. Most endocrinologists providing trans healthcare are incompetent. No. So the dark past. There's a sex researcher named Ray Blanchard. He's a gay man, and he was studying trans women, and he came up with a typology, like basically ways of categorizing trans women. And he said that there are two kinds of trans women. He said there were homosexual, transsexual trans women and autogynephilic trans women. And homosexual transsexuals were attracted to men, usually expressed gender incongruence very early on as children, and their dysphoria was like it had more to do with their genitalia. They tended to be shorter than AGP trans women. They tended to be more feminine. And on the other side, there were autogynephiles, or AGP trans women. And these trans women were attracted to women. They tended to be taller and more masculine. They realized they were trans later in puberty, and they were aroused by the idea of themselves as women. And so these AGP transsexuals, when they decided to transition, they had dysphoria. So Blanchard believes in dysphoria. He believes that both homosexual transsexuals and AGPs have dysphoria. But he thinks that like if you have dysphoria and another motivating factor, you're much more likely to transition. And so if you have dysphoria, sex dysphoria, which is just like discomfort with your sex, and then you also have like a sexual fetish for being a woman, then you're much more likely to transition. And these are the AGPs. And on the other side, he thinks that if you have sex dysphoria and you want to like escape persecution as a gay man, or you just want to be like accepted by broader society in a way that like you couldn't as a gay man, then you might instead choose to transition. And these were the homosexual transsexuals who did this. And that's like the broad overview of the typology. It's mostly been like discredited. People like a lot of his research methods are not the best, but as far as like, do AGP trans women exist? Absolutely. And do homosexual transsexuals exist? Probably, but that categorization seems to be very particular to a certain kind of culture, time, and place. So, like in Iran, where people have the option to like get gender reassignment rather than live as homosexuals, that's the kind of place where Blanchard would say that like there's a lot of homosexual transsexuals. Keep in mind that Blanchard is pretty insane, and a lot of trans people disagree with his theories. Yeah, I think like it never feels good to be labeled as a fetishist. It never feels good to have like your sexual interests exposed. And so I think a lot of trans women are very unwilling to like cop to their autogynephilia, um, which is very understandable. Because this guy is saying that like if you're a trans woman, you probably have this sexual fetish. And they're like, dude, like maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I don't want you revealing that. And I think that's pretty legitimate. Yeah, and so like skin human, you say, I'm sure Blanchard's model can be applied to a few trans women, but it's way too faulty to apply to all trans women or even most. I would say that's more my position, where I would say that like I think the model works in that it categorizes me correctly. And I think that it works in that it categorizes a lot of trans women I know correctly. But I don't necessarily think it's like the end all be all. I think it's possible to be trans and not have autogynephilia or be a homosexual transsexual. Okay, helping minors access the resources to purchase DIY HRT is morally reprehensible. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think minors are, if they want to get HRT, they should go through hoops. As minors don't make good decisions. When it comes to trans healthcare, people should trust their doctors over what they read online. Yeah, definitely. Trans liberation through assimilation. Yeah, I think so. A lot of people are trans purely for the attention or brownie points. Yeah, so I'd say that like this, a lot of trans people who don't have dysphoria, this is them. It's just a fun label for them. Homosexual, transsexual would be a trans woman who's attracted to men in this typology. So they're meaning like homosexual literally, where it's like penis, penis. HRT should only be a last resort, not a first line treatment. Hmm. Um, I think I tend to agree. Yeah. I think you should try like socially transitioning, or playing around with gender first before you start HRT. Gender abolitionism is desirable. I don't think so. I've talked about this with Avash. I think that gender categories give people a roadmap for engaging in the world and especially engaging with people of the opposite sex. And I think that the stories that we tell ourselves regarding what is appropriate or inappropriate behavior for men and women are really important. And the virtues and values that you get from like having gender roles is something that is desirable. And gender abolitionism would destroy that. Can't HRT be more in the middle rather than all or nothing? Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, like you can take like blockers for testosterone or estrogen rather than taking testosterone or estrogen itself. America's informed consent model for HRT is preferable to the European trans healthcare model. I don't know enough about European trans healthcare. I would guess that it varies quite a lot between European countries. So I'm going to say neutral. Genital preferences are transphobic. Definitely not. I can't believe this needs to be said, but like having a preference for genitals is not transphobic at all. Genitals will massively change the way that you engage with sex with someone. And if you have a penis and your partner has a penis, having sex with your partner is going to feel different than having sex with your partner if they had a vagina. And having a preference for like one kind of sexual activity over another is pretty reasonable. And so having a preference for genitals, I think, is also pretty reasonable. If you're someone who exclusively likes to bottom, I think it's understandable if you want your partner to have a penis because you want your partner to get the physical sensation when they're fucking you. I think that could be reasonable. I think it's reasonable if you just like the ease and convenience of penis and vagina sex. I think that's also reasonable. So I'll say strongly disagree. HRT should never be given without psychiatric evaluation. Also, I think that I should tweet this. Okay, psychiatric evaluation. No, I think there are probably some cases. There's like a lot of cases where HRT should be given without. Like if I go to a doctor and I want to get like a prescription filled for HRT, I think you should be able to just look at me and be like, they've been transitioning for 7 years. I think they'll be okay. Online mainstream trans discourse is dominated by cis men who don't understand trans issues. I mean, just by like virtue of the fact that there are more cis men in mainstream political discourse circles than trans men, yeah, I'd say so. I don't think that's a bad thing, though. I think that's an inevitable thing. So I'll say neutral. Eugenics through gene editing and gender dysphoria, to end gender dysphoria is desirable. Yeah, I think that would be great. I think there's a lot of glorification of mental illness and of suffering and of it's very much this kind of Nietzschean slave morality where like the more you suffer, the more virtuous you are in our culture. And I think that like when you look at something like gender dysphoria, I don't think it's something to be celebrated. I think it's tragic that someone might want to remove otherwise healthy genitals. That causes a lot of pain and suffering for people. And so if you could remove gender dysphoria, like in utero, I think that would be good. Or Chandler Grit. What? True scum axis, crippling dysphoric. I feel like this is surprising. Interesting. I'm surprised that I got true scum. That's 62. So I feel like I was answering questions early on about dysphoria and saying that like trans people don't need dysphoria to be trans, which is kind of like the end all be all. But maybe this test like teased out some of my values that are more underlying to the test's credit. Wow, good stuff, guys. Good memes. Yeah, I was gonna go on this fanatic panel, but alas, I will not. Let's look if there are Twitch streamers that I can bother. Oh, Stardust is on a Roe v. Wade panel. I'm gonna look at Stardust and ignoring chat. I think you might be the only one uninterested in the Roe v. Wade stuff. It's pretty important. I was reading a study earlier about how abortion, how a significant portion of the crime rate drop since the 1990s can be reliably attributed to access to abortion. So the societal implications for allowing anti-abortion laws are pretty big. That said, personally, I'm against Roe v. Wade. I think it's unconstitutional. Okay, here's the problem with my whole camera setup. And it's that you've got like all of this headspace. When you could be looking at my body, what's the deal? This space could just be used more efficiently, that's all I'm saying. Do I think the right to abortion should be codified into law? I like the idea that in America, there are separate small state governments which are able, and local governments, which are able to codify different things into law. I think that what happens when you have like a local government that bans abortion is the people who really want access to abortion have the option to leave and live elsewhere. And that state is going to suffer the consequences of that, and they're going to suffer the consequences of increased crime and whatnot. And I think it should be their decision whether or not they want to suffer those consequences of like less access to young women who are going to be living and working or getting educations in their area, suffer the accesses to like suffer the increased crime. I think they should be able to choose that for their local community. And I think that the Constitution is something that should like broadly give guidelines about these sorts of things. Poor people don't have the option to just move. I think it's all right. I mean, like, I think most people are able to move, especially like the people who are like most affected, which is like young women who don't have like a family. Taft. People have suggested this means the right to privacy is under threat and other legal protections may also be overturned. How likely is this? Really, really unlikely, I think, because there's been tons of pressure to overturn Roe v. Wade, but there hasn't been tons of pressure to overturn other rulings. However, if other rulings were overturned, I don't necessarily think that would be wrong, because again, I think it has to be constitutional. And I would have to look at the constitutionality of these different cases. I think the derivation of this like right to privacy from the 14th Amendment is fairly weak. And then going one step further to abortion is even weaker. And the reason why it's like not totally analogous to like being gay, right? Just like in the privacy of your bedroom, or, you know, yeah, is that it could potentially like affect these potential persons. And I think that that's a good reason why abortion might be something that is best settled outside the Supreme Court through Congress. Neither side of the abortion debate is coherent with a state-by-state solution. It's just a compromise made for the sake of effectiveness. I mean, here's the thing, is that like a state-by-state solution introduces a lot of problems too, with just like how you legislate it and how you legislate like outlawing people who leave the state to get abortions or get abortions in other states and come into that state. I think there's a lot of problems, but I think at the end of the day, what you have to understand is that like the more restrictive abortion laws become in an individual state, like let's say like North Dakota becomes like very restrictive with abortion laws, or like Texas becomes very restrictive with abortion laws. Companies like Apple or Google are going to be a lot less willing to like build headquarters in Texas. Apple and Google tend to be very progressive companies. They tend to employ young people who really care about these issues and may be really affected by them. And so if these companies like choose to go elsewhere, where access to abortions is easy, then I think that that's like a legitimate consequence that these states should suffer as a result of enacting abortion laws. Bans and restrictions on abortion are religious-based arguments. The Constitution prohibits the government on taking sides. Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that all law is going to be based on certain fundamental axioms that people have subjectively and just by assumption that they can't justify rationally. These are basically religious assumptions, and even if they don't come from looking at the Bible, they're going to be axiomatic. And so I think the idea that like the law should never, you know, have anything to do with subjective moral opinions is, I mean, it's totally ridiculous, because it always will have to do with subjective moral opinions. There's pretty much nothing on the medical effects of HRT. That's definitely not true. For example, like estrogen can make you more prone to blood clots. Testosterone has a lot of effects. If you're off HRT, for example, and you just have like a blocker that can put you at risk for osteoporosis. So I find the abortion laws would just lock easy access to the rich who can easily leave the state while raising the risk, dare I say, coating our ones off the poor and unwell. Yeah, I think so. And I think that'll cause higher crime rates in states that enact these sort of anti-abortion laws. So I think states that have abortion laws will get worse, but the people within them will feel morally superior. Whoa, crazy stuff. The left makes such bad arguments on abortion that it makes you lose your mind. Like what? Like the fetus is a parasite arguments. Yeah, I do think that like when the left uses these arguments, like, well, what if there's like rape or incest, or what if like the woman's life is threatened? Oh, mostly anti-abortion laws cover those cases, um, and yeah, it does get like pretty hyperbolic sometimes. The abortion debate only has a single question: is the fetus a human life? Nothing else matters. No, I don't think that's true because I think it's possible to accept that the fetus is a human life, but then also accept that some human lives are permissible to like eliminate. Um, so you could make that argument and just like bite the moral bullet. It's never going to look good optically, which is why you don't have those debates publicly. But like in a philosophy classroom, you're going to have those debates, and they're going to be pretty honest. Like the idea that like 45% of the crime rate drop from the 1990s to now is attributable to access to, easy access to safe abortions. That's something that you might say, well, maybe it's okay if we're like sacrificing some like barely sentient humans to do. You could, but no one does. No one operates in a moral framework of being okay with legalizing certain kinds of murder. It would be a relevant question if people did have this view, but I reject that they do. I mean, if we can be like pedantic about our words, it's not murder. Because murder is like by definition unlawful killing. And we do have lawful killing in the United States. We have the death penalty. So people do operate within the moral framework that it's okay to legalize killing in some instances. And the cases in which they believe it's okay to authorize killing are cases when it benefits society. At least that's where the argument goes. They argue that it benefits society to remove these criminals, that it's the cheaper, sometimes the more humane option. They make these arguments. And so I think you'd make a similar argument with abortion. You'd say that like these are the kinds of persons that I think it's okay for a mother to engage in killing. Yeah, like the police as well, or in self-defense. So we can think of a lot of cases where there are lawful killings. Yes, but the question of abortion is not, is it okay to legalize killing, but is this form of killing morally murder? Because almost no one would be okay with legalizing forms of moral murder. I'm not familiar with this term, moral murder, but I agree. Is this a form of moral killing? Is the question. Right. Yeah, I agree. I would say that, like, that is sometimes the debate, but the fact that you're saying that that's the debate, the fact that you're saying that is the debate contradicts something that you said earlier, which is whether the debate, what earlier you said the debate is about whether it's killing at all, right? Because if it's not a person, it's not a kill. Just like smashing rocks is not killing someone. And so if you're arguing whether or not a fetus is a person, I think you're arguing about whether it's killing at all in the first place. And then there's a separate argument of like whether or not that kind of killing can be justified. And I think these are both legitimate arguments. I would say that like I'm not sure if a fetus is a person or not. I think that that's kind of like an irrelevant semantic argument about definitions of what a person is. I think the really like more honest conversation to have is whether or not killing of this, this being, whether it's like sentient or person, not a person, killing of this fetus is morally correct. And I think it's morally permissible. But again, I don't think that Roe v. Wade is constitutional. I reject the significant existence of people who would say the fetus is a human life, but I'm okay with killing it. Yeah, I agree. I don't think that people make this argument. I think making that argument is a more philosophically honest argument to make. But I think most people they argue about whether or not it is a killing, whether or not it is a human life in the first place. And I don't think this is necessarily the most important thing to argue, because again, I think we sometimes, we do have instances where we believe killing is morally justified. And I think that's really the question that we should be asking. Okay, how to get a girlfriend. This is something that I want to talk about. Because I had a very easy time getting a girlfriend. And I had the experience of going on dates with people who told me that the way that I approached dating them was very different from their previous experiences and a lot better than their previous experiences. And so I think I have like some unique insight into this. I think a lot of our cultural rules about dating have been eroded over time. So one example of this would be like the idea that the man always pays for dinner. That's something that's been eroded culturally. The idea that like a man should always give like a woman his coat if she's cold, or care for her, or open the door. These sorts of like rules of courtship have been changed over time. And I think a lot of young men really lack like models for engaging in courtship. And this goes back to the discussion about gender roles that we were having earlier. Having gender roles can be good because it gives people a model for interacting societally with people who are of the opposite sex of yours. And so when you erase gender roles, when you engage in this kind of gender abolition, like what we've seen with the erasure of courtship rules, I think you leave a lot of people feeling lost and unsure of how to engage with things. And at the same time, I think a lot of young women really crave like to be treated in this sort of way, in the way where they're really highly valued and the man is paying for their things and is really putting in an effort to be like the ultimate kind of gentleman. And so I think that like if you're a young man and you want a girlfriend, I would recommend like really studying courtship of the past century and looking at the expectations people had for men, because they were very high. The expectations for both men and women were very high. And if you can meet those expectations, you'll be doing a lot better than a lot of your competition in the dating world. Just because most men are not actually trying to engage with these really high-level ways of acting. So that's what I recommend. How do you do that on Tinder? I think you have to get the date first. So with Tinder, what I always try to do is get a date within like the first 10 messages. I don't like talking to people over messaging, and so I just try to get straight to like talking to them in person. That's what I did with most my most recent girlfriend. I just got straight to it. And I've been on dates with women who have told me that like I was the only person who they've actually met up with off of Tinder in like the year that they were using it off and on, which is crazy to me. But I think it really speaks to the fact that so many people are like not really trying. They'll just go in these like circular conversations forever and not ever get to anything. So I recommend trying to make something of it and just making it spontaneous, making it fun, making it not a big deal. And I think most people are probably not going to go for it, but you shoot out enough messages, you'll eventually get one. Where should one study courtship? Honestly, like if you have grandparents, I would just like ask your grandpa, like, how should I date a woman? Like, what should I be expected to do? Or watch like cheesy romances that girls go for and look at how the men like make these gestures of affection and do these romantic things and really try to speak to women and connect with them. I think it's also about like priorities. I think that women they don't want to feel like they're expandable, that they are just like another woman that you can fuck off of Tinder. They want to feel like they really mean a lot to you, and that you have like meaningful intentions for them. And so I think that like trying to center your intentions and goals with women is important as well. So trying to move away from the shallowness and kind of fast paced, expendable approach to dating that is typical and move to a form of dating that's like really focused on, pursuing meaning and long term relationships. If that's something you're interested in. Unfortunately, if you're just interested in like casual sex or hookups, that's going to really depend on just like how attractive you are. And if you're attractive, if you are a 9 out of 10 man, you'll get that. And if you're a 6 out of 10 man, it's going to be hard. You should get rich. But yeah, I think if you're interested in like the more long-term relationship, there's a lot of strategies you can employ. What's your opinion on hookup culture? It's not good. Okay. I think that like there's a real commodification of relationships that leaves people feeling very empty. And so you see like young people, these Zoomers who are intensely nihilistic and cynical about the world. And I think a lot of it comes from this erosion of meaning, right? And the introduction of like technologies that allow people to just pursue what is pleasurable and what is hedonistic in the moment. And a lot of these technologies, we don't have like cultural stop gaps to prevent their overuse. Um, there's no story in the Bible about what to do about social media addiction. And so the introduction of Facebook into like a culture that doesn't have cultural antibodies for the bad effects of Facebook is going to cause issues. And I think that with a lot of these technologies, Tinder being one of them, the incentive and the immediate impulse is to engage with them in a way that's like hedonistic, but doesn't give you long term meaning, and may in fact make your ability to pursue long term relationships less viable in the future. If you spend all of your 20s engaging in hookup culture and then get to your 30s and you're trying to date for the long term, you're going to have, a struggle. Less of a struggle if you're a man, more of a struggle if you're a woman. But if you're a man and you have money, you can still probably do it. If you're a man and you don't have money by your 30s, you're really going to struggle. If you just engaged in hookup culture as a teenager, as a 20-year-old. And so that like loss of meaningful companionship and connection, I think has been really detrimental. If you look at like rates of happiness between people, married people do really well. So I think there's really something to be said about pursuing something meaningful with someone else. There are people who can engage in hookup culture and be totally fine. I don't think that's most people, right? Most people think they can, but they can't. Well, I don't know what to say. I was just responding to chat for a while. Hmm. Who needs hookup culture when you got anti-culture? So true, unfortunately. I put prions and MTF estradiol medication. Nice. Building connections is pretty key part of human experience. Tossing that aside as your default for society is an awful idea. Yeah, and I don't even think it's been like an intentional choice by people. I really think that like we've introduced these technologies like social media, and they've allowed people to engage with each other in ways that were impossible in previous generations. And so we didn't have established norms about appropriate ways to engage with Facebook or with Tinder. And there wasn't an accepted wisdom. You didn't grow up being taught to do it a certain way. And so people are just sort of thrown into the Wild West of these social media sites. When you're thrown into the Wild West, you tend to make bad decisions. You tend to make decisions which, are immediately short term, pleasurable, but may not be good in the future. Is half your face paralyzed from surgery? No, that's just my face. If a majority of society around you is racist or abusive, your race, what options you have if you are financially restricted, specifically you're a male, they are extremely restricted options. Yeah, not great. It obviously like it depends on what your options are. I think that like one of the most interesting historical processes is like analyzing how minority people in different cultures have been able to succeed. So like looking at Chinese people in Hawaii, looking at Chinese people in California, looking at young Jewish men, young Black men, even like Scottish men interacting with Englishmen or young Irishmen, etc. I think that like all of these are examples of racial groups that like at one time were historically very discriminated against, but have since been able to rise like high levels of attainment and success. And so I think that that's really impressive, and it's beneficial to look at like how they did that. A lot of times, like the best way to do it, at least in the short term, is just to like try to succeed economically and build familial wealth, pass it on to your children, allow them to get better education, to have access to more resources, and instill with them the cultural expectation that they do that for their children. Generation after generation, you build wealth, you build education, and eventually you end up with these like minority groups which perform really well. Oh, okay. I wanted to like talk to that person, or I don't want to talk to that person because they're like an asshole. But I do want to like mention when I like smile, I don't know, like I just like can't quite like move half my face. It's been that way since I was like 14. It has to do with like jaw development, I think. It's also like the way that I talk, like I tend to talk out of the side of my mouth. But yeah, I like actually like a big reason why I like didn't go on camera for the longest time is because I was just like I felt so insecure about like the way that I talked because I tended to talk out of one side of my mouth, and I thought that just like looked weird and gross. And like the reason why like I tend not to smile in pictures is because I don't like how my smile looks because it is like so asymmetrical. And so I just like never did that. But yeah. I think actually if I did get surgery, I think there it is possible and get surgery to like correct that though, which I was considering for a while. Okay. Um Bro, yeah. I love like everyone in chat who's like, it's noticeable, but like cute, or like, I don't care. I think that's really nice. Like, I don't know, it means a lot to me. But then, of course, you do have like, I don't know, assholes who will come in and be like, like, do you paralyze your face with Botox? Like, what's wrong with you? Which I think is like kind of shitty to say to someone like their face is just like that genetically. All right. Since I am not going to be on a panel tonight, I am going to say goodnight for now. I love you all. You guys are amazing, incredible, beautiful. I love every chatter. Um, because you guys make this interesting to do. So thank you all for being here. Good night.